How we doing? IB Nation Sports Talk up and rolling. It's Mailbag night with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. How you doing tonight, Vince?
Doing fantastic. Just walked in the door not that long ago. Had enough time to kiss the wife and say hi to the kids, and right into Mailbag Wednesday, baby. So let's roll.
Here we go. Here we go.
It's gonna be fun.
It's here. Get your questions in right now. If you're just logging in, hit the like button. Spread the word that we are here. And we've got a lot of different topics we can get to. And of course, we can also answer some basketball questions, both men's and women's. Don't ask me any hockey questions. I'm just going to tell you up front. I too many other things going on. I'm not going to. It's not that I don't want to.
Look, we're not just source for hockey news. I'm sorry.
That's right.
I hate to break it to everybody out there. I know there's a lot of hockey fans in the chat most of the time, but it is just not something that we pay that close of attention to.
Yes.
That's what I'll say.
That's what it is. That's all I can tell you.
There's a lot going on in the wintertime, though. That's the thing. We got men's and women's basketball. We got everything with the offseason with Notre Dame, our bowl game, with the football team, all of that. And then it's me specifically, I have to cover a lot of high school events as well. And so, hockey is kind of in the back of the line.
Yes. I'm just not a hockey guy. I've said that
not either.
Hockey's one of those sports, growing up in Kansas, there was no hockey in Kansas. And I've always thought, like looking at the sport, it's a sport I think I would have been interested in.
Sure.
Just because it's a physical sport. And, the whole thing, it's like kind of football on ice a little bit, or, to an extent, just because the physicality and stuff like that. But we didn't have it.
Right. I didn't grow up with it.
Yeah, I've known some guys, who grew up playing hockey. It is an expensive sport to play. I imagine I would have had even more like stitches in my lip, if I had grown up playing hockey and probably lost some teeth. So maybe, from my mom's point of view, she's probably, happy that I didn't, play hockey, wrestling and football and baseball, baseball from a physicality standpoint.
Well,
but
and even around here, Sean, I mean, now there's a lot of hockey, but when I was a kid around here, and maybe I was just numb to all of it, but I don't remember like my friends playing hockey, and things like that. I just don't remember that being the case. I remember my high school had a hockey team, but that was really it.
It seems like, especially since they built the Compton, thank you. Since they built that, there's more access, because they have the side rinks and stuff like that. They've got the ice box and stuff like that here in town. I'm not sure how long that's been around, but there's definitely a better infrastructure around here, even for like curling, for that matter. I think I told you, we went up to northern Michigan this summer, and out in the middle of nowhere, they built one of these, a micro brew and pizza and stuff like that. And it's in an old schoolhouse that was converted into this brewery, but they also have a curling rink, curling, sheets of ice and stuff like that in there. A curling club meets in place. So that's you don't see that around here.
See, that's a sport that you and I could take up.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
curling I'd be into.
I'm down. I get revved up around the Olympics every time when it comes to curling, and then I lose interest for like 3 years, and then I get revved up again when the Olympics come. You know what I mean? So I'd be down, man. If you want to start a curling team, I'm down.
Shannon throwing some shade at us. Does Notre Dame sweep Penn State this weekend in hockey and break the top 10? LOL.
Sure. Why not?
Sure. Yeah, we'll go with it. Go with it.
Go Irish.
A couple little sort of business keeping issues to get to. First and foremost, the big news of the day is the commitment of Brandon Hillman from Virginia earlier today. Now, again, like Vince and I don't get deep into recruiting, but I know Brian and Ryan pretty excited about this guy. And he's a guy who played a lot of quarterback in high school, but played on both sides of the ball as well. And what Brian has said is rover and wide receiver, I think, seem to be like the two potential positions he could end up at. It's one of those, just a great athlete, really explosive. Wait till he gets here and figure out what you want him to do.
Yeah, it sounds like he was obviously a dual threat type of quarterback. And I was actually listening to Brian and Ryan talk about Hillman when he made the commitment. And Brian said that he could be a college quarterback if, like, for example, what was the guy's name who was the coach at Michigan and went to Arizona? He was at West Virginia. Help me out. Rodriguez.
Yeah.
He could be a quarterback like in that sort of a system and be really good. It's just teams aren't running that sort of a system anymore, right? Yeah. And so, the way college football has kind of been is skewing as far as offensively, he's just going to be better off playing another position. But the kid is he's an athlete, right? He's not going to come in under a specific position. And from what it sounded like from the guys, he is somebody that is being fought over, within the staff. It's like the defensive guys want him, the offensive guys want him. That's a great place to be because he's going to make some room at Notre Dame better as soon as he walks on campus.
Yeah. Tommy said curling's a bunch of dads who got drunk one day and needed something to do on the weekends while their wives took the kids for the weekend. And it's like, especially if you're in the northern, if you're in Wisconsin and Minnesota and in those kind of places, northern Michigan, like what the heck else are you going to do? Yeah. So I've got, he said, it sounds like the perfect week. Yeah. So
let's go
right there. We had a question, I believe it was on Monday, about if we were going to be able to get to watch any bowl practices. And as we assumed, when we got the media schedule today, the pre-Gator Bowl media schedule, there's going to be a Marcus Freeman press conference Saturday. I'll just say this, there won't be any practice availability while the team is still in town, just like we thought. So Saturday, we're going to get a Marcus Freeman press conference. Sunday, we'll get the coordinators once again, just like we have throughout the season. Tommy Rees, Al Golden, Brian Mason. Then a week from Saturday, we'll get some defensive players. The next day, December the 18th, some offensive players. Wednesday, the 21st, signing day. The early signing period begins. Marcus Freeman at 1 o'clock that day. And then that does it, December 21st, for the in-town before they head to Florida portion. Now, once they get to Florida, there are going to be, a few opportunities. Monday, the 26th, at a high school down there in Jacksonville, you'll basically get the individual periods are going to be open to the media. So,
and to me, it's very obvious that is the Gator Bowl's doing, because not once have we ever gotten FSA and individual periods. Like that's not how Notre Dame does it. So that tells me that the Gator Bowl is like, hey, these are going to be open. FYI.
And just like we said, it's up to the bowl once they get there, what they decide. But that'll be the only day, that'll be the only practice. The FSA and individual periods on the 26th, and then coordinators again, and then the head coach again, pregame press conference the day before the bowl game with Marcus Freeman. So that's what it looks like once they get down there to Jacksonville in the next couple of weeks. But we'll get to talk to Marcus Freeman Saturday. That'll be a busy day for me. I'll call a game at noon, get done around 2 o'clock, hopefully kind of crank out a little bit of a recap of the game, and then walk across the sidewalk and into the football stadium and cover the press conference.
Hey, at least it's all right there.
Yeah.
Love it.
Perfect.
It works.
That's right. All right. Should we get to some questions?
Yeah, let's do it. There's actually some pretty good conversation going on over here at the moment. Some jaded Notre Dame fans and
let's see,
all kinds of good stuff.
Were there any that you wanted to start with in particular?
Oh, there's one that we're gonna have to really think about. Somebody asked.
I don't know. My brain's frozen right now.
Yeah, I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but Rocket Rebound says how many freshmen and sophomores are going to start in 2023. And I will say this as a caveat: these guys aren't even on campus yet.
Yeah,
and I don't know that we can project that these guys are all going to start. And then you get into even further. Are we talking redshirt freshmen? Are we talking redshirt sophomores?
And we also still don't know who they're going to bring in the transfer portal. That's the biggest part of it. And that's what I said the other day when we were talking about it, is you have to, like, when whoever leaves and decides they're entering the transfer portal, and it's been still a relatively small number to this point. That doesn't mean it's not going to grow. Still expect it to grow, but it's still been a pretty small number. But once that happens, then you've got to, and the other important thing before I even get into that is you don't have to be down to the 85-man limit until the first game next year. So you can
Correct.
carry well above in the spring, like you can carry more guys than you're going to have on your roster, and that, then guys can make decisions after the spring. But so you can carry much more. But what's the transfer portal going to look like? Who are you bringing in, and at what position?
Right.
And then it still goes back to, as talented as these freshmen are, they're still freshmen, and this staff showed that there's some talent, but they didn't rush these guys out on the field just because they had some talent. They still had a standard that they were trying to hold them to, and benchmarks that they wanted them to hit in practice to earn their way on the field. So I think it's way too early to try to make that prediction, because we don't know what the roster is going to look like yet.
There's just, and he kind of follows it up with this question, and so we'll kind of touch on this at the same time. How many transfers are the staff expected to bring in the offseason, and at what positions? That's kind of remains to be seen. I mean, we could go through and we could project what we think might be the case. Like, I think they're going to bring in a defensive lineman. If Justin Adamalola goes to the NFL, I think they'll bring in 2 defensive linemen at that point. I don't think they're going to bring in any linebackers. I don't think they're going to bring any secondary in, because I think they're pretty deep at secondary, to be honest. And you flip over to the other side of the ball, quarterback. That's
quarterback
1.
and wide receiver.
Wide receiver, that's 2. So you're going to bring at least 1 of each, right? Maybe 2 wide receivers, depending on how things go. But I would say 1 is a definite.
I think it's like 4 scholarship wide receivers that they've got as of right now for next year.
And you've got a big class coming in. I think you got 5 coming in at the moment. That puts you at 9. And then you bring in a transfer, that puts it 10. And I think 10 is kind of that magic number at wide receiver that you kind of want to be at. 10 scholarship wide receivers, that is. So in my head, I'm thinking like 4 total, like transfers overall. But, they're not going to bring in a running back. They're not going to bring in any offensive linemen, I wouldn't think. They're not going to bring any tight ends. So you're only looking at a few position groups. Now, with all that said, if there's defections that the staff isn't prepared for, right, then they will go to the portal to augment and fill some of those holes. So, there's going to be a wave of kids now going to the portal. There's going to be a wave of kids after the bowl game going to the portal. And there's going to be a wave of kids after spring practice going to the portal.
Yeah.
You have to expect all 3 waves, and then the staff is going to adjust, and they're going to fill the holes. So it's going to be a wild ride in the offseason, I think, really for the foreseeable future at every team, or everybody that covers a team, to see. I mean, just because of the transfer portal and defections and all that.
Everyone, like we talked about the transfer portal mania on yesterday's show, and that's what it is. I mean, 1,000 guys went into the portal on day 1, and I don't even know what the number is up to right now. I think I saw something like 60 quarterbacks, in it.
It's crazy
right away. And we know who the big names are, but there are a lot of other guys as well. Yeah. So just what you said, quarterback, wide receiver, 2 biggest priorities on the offense, really the only priorities on the offense, but then defensive line, defensively, especially as you pointed out, whatever Justin Adamalola decides whether he's coming back.
And that's a big one too. I mean, that's a
and
big
I think
one.
that to me, I think it should be a slam dunk for him that he comes back, because he's an undersized guy, and he was still Robin to Isaiah Foskey's Batman, basically, as the number 2 guy this year, with a chance to bump up the depth chart, potentially be number 1 next year at that Viper defensive end position, and really make a name for himself, because you can be undersized as an edge rusher, they're in the NFL. I'm saying, as long as you can, get off that line quick enough, and you've got the moves and the speed to get in there, you can be a little bit undersized, but he's got some things that he can prove next year and turn himself into a draft pick, because I think at best he's a late round guy right now, and probably even in that free agent mode, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So I think there's like I said, big chance for him to come back and improve his stock. Tommy Guns, how do each of you see the tight end position being used next year? That Mayer has officially declared for the draft, and we didn't even mention that off the top, that Michael Mayer has declared for the draft today. In case you missed it on social media, he made his announcement. Obviously, not one guy can replace him. So how do you see roles being divvied up?
Well, you're right. You can't replace Michael Mayer, but you're going to have to replace him in the aggregate, right? And whether that's, we're talking about this specific bowl game, I think we're talking more along the lines of the future, right? And what this offense looks like next year. But look, I think Mitchell Evans is probably your starter. I don't think he's as dynamic, obviously catching the ball as Michael Mayer was, but the two freshmen that got, some spotty playing time here and there,
Mm-hmm.
they are dynamic catching the football. And I think between the three of them, I think you can, and then you throw in the wide receivers as well. And so if we're talking about just receptions and yards, you're going to have to spread it out a little bit. It's not all going to go to the tight end group. That's for sure. You're going to be more 11 personnel than, when you want to throw the ball than they have been in the past, because you weren't going to take Michael Mayer off the field, period. Right.
And I think whoever your quarterback is going to learn to have to use the field a little bit more rather than lock in on one guy.
Absolutely.
Just because he's an All-American, he was an All-American and he did All-American things, but as we've seen, that worked against the entirety of the offense, I think, this season, because the quarterback got locked in on one guy too much. So I think it potentially opens things up. But I really like Reardon. Before his injury, we saw it early with the blocking and just the size that he has and the length. He can fill out a little more. None of these guys. Now, I mean, if one of them turns into Michael Mayer, awesome. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he did just. He leaves Notre Dame as the all-time tight end.
The all-time everything as a tight end. Yeah.
Receptions, yardage, and touchdowns.
And this is tight end U. And so that's not that's saying something.
Saying
right?
A lot.
Yes. That's saying a lot. So there's a lot of history at the tight end position, and he shattered all of the records. So you're not going to be able to replace him from an individual standpoint. You got to replace him in the aggregate, and they can do that. But I also think it'll make them a better offense, as you were kind of alluding to, because whoever the quarterback is, they're going to have to spread the ball out more. And that's going to make you better than just having a stud that you force the ball into.
And you're still going to have an excellent offensive line. You're still going to have an excellent running game to go with it. So there's a ton of upside and potential for this offense. Again, when you're not so, myopic, I guess, looking at one guy predominantly.
Right.
So Johnny wants to know if Mayer could stick around and help coach up the other tight ends.
I mean, are we referring to the bowl game, or are we referring to like next year? I mean, obviously he's going to the NFL.
I assume he's talking about the bowl game.
Okay.
It's like, I assume, because it's not like anyone's going to expect him to stick around, for the spring semester and be coaching the tight ends during spring ball and that kind of thing.
Right.
I wouldn't think.
No, and I don't think he's going to stick around for the bowl game either, because here's the thing. We have to remember this, and I don't know if he's changed his tune, and maybe this is a question that you can ask him on Saturday, Sean, but last year when Kyle Hamilton and Kyron Williams declared for the draft and they opted out of the bowl game,
what I was going to say,
Marcus Freeman said, "Hey guys, I think that's the right decision for you. That's awesome, but you are no longer a part of the team. You are now an alum.
Time to move on.
If you want to come to the game, you can come as an alum, that sort of a thing. And we will always love you around here, but you're a distraction now. You don't need to be at practice and you don't need to be there." If he continues that, line of thinking, Michael Mayer's not going to be welcome. And that's not the right way to put it. He's not going to be at practice.
Right.
He's just not.
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think, just based on what you said right there, unless Marcus Freeman has kind of done a 180 on his thinking there. Just what you said. Kyron Williams, Kyle Hamilton, they were not.
They were team guys all along. I mean, they were team guys till the end. And
it wasn't a negative. It's just like,
hey, you made your decision.
You've made your decision. We've got to move on with the team that we've got now. That kind of thing.
And also, I just want to throw this out there, and it's not necessarily Michael Mayer specific, but just because you're a really good player doesn't mean you're a coach. Doesn't mean that you're good at coaching up kids.
Yeah.
I've seen that a million times. Like, just because you're a really good player does not mean that you can disseminate that information to another player because it came to you so naturally. Sometimes it's very frustrating as a coach to try to get that information passed on to others. So I'm not saying that for him specifically, but just because he's really good doesn't mean he knows how to coach kids up either.
Exactly. Heisman talk. Who do you guys like for Heisman. We were talking before we started. I saw this question
Yeah.
come in. So you've got Max Duggan from TCU. You've got Caleb Williams from USC. You've got Stetson Bennett from Georgia and C.J. Stroud from Ohio State. To me, and I think you agree with this, Caleb Williams is the hands down winner to me.
Run away.
I think the bigger question is who's going to be 2, who's going to be 3. I think Stetson Bennett finishes 4th myself.
I agree with that too.
I think it's, like career achievement award, good player on a great team kind of thing.
It's kind of a resume thing for him. You know what I mean? He's a national champion. He's 25 years old. He's been around for a really long time. This is almost like you're a stat accumulator, Hall of Famer, that kind of a thing. And I almost feel like this is just thanks for everything you've done. You've been really good for Georgia. You get to go hang out in New York for a couple days. Like I just don't think that he's a legitimate contender for the Heisman Trophy. What I honestly think happened, Sean, is I think Caleb Williams was literally the runaway winner. And the reason that, because they don't always invite 4, right? The reason they invited 4.
The 3 were so close that they had to invite 4.
They were so close, but so far behind. You know what I mean? Like it was just a cluster.
He was up here and the other 3 were here, and they were because that's how you end up with 4 is if it's close enough, you get 4. That's a good point. That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think so as well.
Yeah. And who's 2, who's 3? I think that's a debate, to be honest with you. I do
too.
I think you could, how I would vote it, I think I would put Duggan in 2nd and I would put Stroud 3rd.
Feel exactly the same. I think Duggan, especially when you look at where TCU came from a year ago and just look at his numbers, look what the team did, and then you look at C.J. Stroud, who had NFL talent all around him.
Everywhere.
I think everyone thought Stroud was going to have a better year than what he did. I know I did.
Agreed.
And, he still had a really good year, but I would do exactly what you did. I would go Caleb Williams, Max Duggan, C.J. Stroud, Stetson Bennett. That's how my ballot would look like if I had a ballot.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I highly doubt anybody in here is a big TCU fan, and there's obviously not a lot of Ohio State fans, but I bet you could name 2 to 3 wide receivers at Ohio State, and I would challenge people to name 1 at TCU.
That's exactly.
You know what I mean?
And I watched a good chunk of that game last week, and basically Duggan is the only name I can remember right now.
And that's me too. I mean, I'm considering myself as part of that group. Like he is that team to me, right? And he was that team on that final drive, So yeah, I think he deserves to be number 2, but it's going to be a distant 2nd.
Yes. Sparks, yes, they canceled the Notre Dame women's basketball game at Lafayette. That's basically why I'm here right now.
Yeah.
I should be, what time is it? I should be in the air right now on a flight to Pennsylvania for the game tomorrow, but because they postponed it, and it was the health and safety protocols is what they called it. It was on Lafayette's end. They are apparently looking to try to reschedule. I'm not sure how hopeful we should be with that, especially, because we're sitting here at the point of the season now. We're coming up on the holidays. You're going to have finals here coming up, so you have to, it wipes that out, and then you're going to get into conference play. So I think the question is, when Notre Dame has a conference bye, do they want to stick a Lafayette game in there and travel to Lafayette? And does Lafayette have an opening in their conference schedule as well? So it's kind of tough. So, would look forward to meeting you, Spark. We'll see. I'm sure, even if they don't play this year, I'm sure they'll work it on the schedule next year, because there is a Notre Dame connection out there at Lafayette. That's how it came along to begin with, So we'll see. We'll see if it happens. But they play at home against Merrimack on Saturday. Not quite as high profile as UConn. But it's a home game.
Here we go. Continuing with the girls, or the women's, women's basketball.
John, I believe Miles and Citron are 2 of the best women's sophomores in the nation. What say you? Now, I don't know the list of sophomores off the top of my head right now, but, AZ Fudd is in there. She was injured during the game the other day. I mean, I'll just say that I have the privilege of being able to watch these 2 game in and game out. And there's no doubt in my mind, they're not just two of the better sophomores in the nation. They're two of the best players in the nation, period. And they're a big part of why the women's basketball program was, and Neil and Ivy were able to beat UConn on Saturday because of, and it's not just those two, obviously, but I mean, you see what Olivia Miles does game in and game out. And I've said it before. Citron is just like, she's like a little bit like Steve Vistoria. You remember him? They used to call him like the baby-faced assassin. And that's kind of, she's like the silent assassin, man. She doesn't say a lot. The expression on her face never changes, but she's always around the basketball. She's sticking her nose in there, diving for loose balls.
Yeah.
She's a guard at 6'1", which, for a women's guard, 6'1" is pretty good size, but she's leading the team in rebounds, around 8 rebounds per game as a guard. And, and again, you see what Olivia Miles does, just the way she distributes and drives and everything else. So yeah, they're not just two of the better sophomores in the nation. They're two of the best players in the nation, period. Vince concurs.
I do. I have nothing to add because I did my Olivia Miles fan gushing on the last show. So she's just amazing to watch. Some of the passes that she hits. I mean, she threw one from one side of the court all the way to the other in the corner. It was like, oh, and it was an absolute bullet. I mean, that's not easy to do, number one. And then the way she just goes to the rim is just
right.
Shouldn't be allowed. She's too good.
Shamrocker says, has Mayer said he's opting out of the bowl game, or is he not able to play because he said he's going to the draft? Just to clarify that, I guess.
I don't believe, and I'm going to look it up right here, but I don't believe that he has announced it himself. I believe Pete Thamel is the one that announced that he was going to. Oh, never mind.
No, I was going to say he tweeted it a few hours ago.
I see it. Yep, it was 4 hours ago.
He basically tweeted out his official goodbye. And while it doesn't say specifically, I'm not playing in the Gator Bowl, he's basically said his goodbye and thank yous and all that kind of stuff.
And that's, he doesn't need to specifically say it. He's entering into the NFL draft. He said he's ready to start his next chapter. So, yeah, he's not going to play in the game. And that it's expected. It's expected. I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but it's expected. So,
yeah. Yeah, we'll save some more Michael Mayer talk for rapid fire.
Right.
We'll include some more in there. So if you have more Michael Mayer questions, you can get them in. And I know there's at least one other, but we'll save those for rapid fire so we can get some other stuff in here in this early part. We talked about this one last night, so I'll let you kind of chime in a little bit. Matt says, haven't listened to you guys for a while, being busy, but if not, have you discussed what Coach Sanders, Deion Sanders, is telling most of the current Colorado players to think about packing those bags for the portal? What did you think about that?
Well, here's what I'll say. I think, number one, I think it got blown out of proportion just a little bit. He wasn't telling the entire team to join the portal. If he did that, he wouldn't have a team next year. Okay. So he's not doing that, but he's saying, look, what has happened here?
Get with the program.
Right. What has happened here the last 20 years isn't okay. It's not good enough. So raise your game or hit the portal. Like, you decide. It's up to you. We'll coach you up. We'll get you there. But I'm bringing in transfers. I'm doing all the, it's Louis. I'm bringing my baggage. It's Louis. That whole thing. Which, okay, that's a great soundbite. That's awesome. I believe he introduced his son as the starting quarterback. If I'm a quarterback on the team, I'm probably a little PO'd about that.
Well, I did think that was like
a little much.
But I do also think he said something about competing for the job and stuff like that. So again, it's like he's Deion. He's going to come out and make progress. Because he also joked that he's got another son on the team who's a safety. He said, I left him behind because but again, he was joking, so.
Yeah. So, it is what it is, and I don't really have an issue with it. He's telling the guys that what's happened there isn't good enough, and you got to raise your game. Okay, like that's what he should be saying as a new coach. Those aren't his guys, and let's see who wants to do it.
They wouldn't have been 1-11 if if they were going to get a new head coach and everyone was going to come in and be safe. On the one side, I think I said this. As a player, you're kind of hoping, it's like, ooh, we got Deion Sanders. He's going to come in and, all this stuff. And you're kind of hoping he's going to say things to reassure you, like, we're going to do this, this, and this. And we're going to take this program and we're going to be better. But, and he kind of said that, but he also at the same time said what we're talking about. It's like part of getting to where we need to be is some of you guys ain't going to be here anymore.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to do the things that I want you to do, and you're not going to compete, you're not going to have the right attitude, because that was part of his message as well, having the right attitude and work ethic and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to have it. You might as well hit the portal, because I'm bringing the portal guys in.
Right.
I think, again, is he just going to anoint guys starters when he brings them in through the portal? Probably not, but he's telling them
we'll see.
You're going to compete
anointed
for
his
jobs,
son,
at the very least. Yeah, well, yeah.
He definitely anointed his son, and I can't remember who the kid is, but he did have the number 1 recruit in the country. Was it last year?
The guy that he took from Jackson State, and I haven't, or not from Jackson State, from Florida State, obviously, to Jackson State.
Right.
So, what do you think about the fact that he's sticking around and he's coaching Jackson State? I think it's the Celebration Bowl. It's like a 2 HBCU schools. Or what do you think about the fact that he's sticking around to do that? Because a lot of people, when these coach, like this time of year, like Jeff Brom, for example, is leaving Purdue. He's going to head down to Louisville, and obviously Brian Kelly last year. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it just happened.
Okay.
But most coaches accept the new job. They're on to the new school. They're not sticking around to coach at their old school.
I would say a lot of times it's the old school that doesn't want them there. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, if you're leaving, sayonara. But I would also say that Jackson State is going to ride this baby till it bucks them, because they have made a lot of money on the back of Coach Prime, and that will continue as long as he is wearing a Jackson State shirt. You know what I mean?
J on his hat.
Yeah,
that's right.
I would ride that one. And I think this is a unique circumstance, if I'm being honest with you, because Jackson State really benefited from having Prime there, and they knew he was going to leave at some point if he was successful. Obviously, he's decided to leave. If I'm Colorado, I have no problem with it, because he's going to continue to get press, because it's going to be, a situation where he's going to get all the love during that game. And number 2, if I'm Jackson State, I want him around, because I'm going to make more money if he's there. So I think this is unique in that situation. But I think all parties are on board, and I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, all great points. And he's obviously recruiting, he's got offers out there. He's trying to flip guys and everything else. And I mean, this guy can recruit, like you said, he got the kid from Florida State last year to go to Jackson State. And I think it is a little bit awkward when you're sticking around like that, especially like there were some hurt feelings down there in Jackson State. But from the school's point of view, I think you're exactly right. It's one last chance for them to really make some money off it. So why wouldn't they like it? But again, like from the player coach perspective, I would think maybe it could be a little bit awkward. You just don't see it that often.
Yeah, right.
So, but at least he's honoring that part of the obligation. Because again, there's some hurt feelings. There's always hurt feelings when this kind of stuff happens.
Absolutely. And somebody's gonna come out of this being mad. I mean, that's just a guarantee. And there's good ways to handle it, but there's still going to be people mad.
Yeah. Jeff, given the top Notre Dame portal quarterbacks will probably want a decent upfront NIL deal, and Indy is not going to guarantee them the starting job, how likely are they to get one? And if not, is a cone type worth taking?
First of all, why are we assuming that everybody's looking for a bag of money? Why do we assume that, number one?
Because it seems to be the trend.
I mean, Notre Dame has the number 2 recruiting class in the country, and they're not handing out bags of money.
No.
So, I mean, there's obviously kids out there that aren't looking for that.
But remember a couple of weeks ago, Braden Lindsay was asked about, what was the exact question that was that, like if it'd been a frustrating year for him and stuff like that. And he's like, why would I, I'm playing at Notre Dame. It hasn't been frustrating. I'm playing at Notre Dame. And what did he say? Something to the effect of the NIL is wonderful here.
Right.
He mentioned that, so just because we're not talking about it doesn't mean it's not there.
And Notre Dame will never just hand out a blank check. That's not how they do it, but they can outline how you can make money using NIL. Okay. And there's guys at Notre Dame making good money. People need to understand that. Good money. Okay. So that's part of the deal, I guess. But Notre Dame is not going to be handing out blank checks. It's not going to happen. So I don't think that that's an issue in this particular regard. I don't think that's an issue.
The second part of it is a Cohn type worth taking. I mean, let's not forget, okay, Jack Cohn was not the most mobile guy in the world. The guy went 11-1 as a starting quarterback.
And does anybody
if they had figured out the offense before the one, they probably would have been in the playoff with him last year.
And what record do we think Notre Dame would have had if Jack Cohn was a starter for 12 games this past year? 11-1?
At worst 10-2, I think.
Absolute worst. And I think the reality is more like 11-1. Right. And so, yes, a Jack Cohn type is worth taking. Okay. Yes, is the answer to that question.
Yeah. The experience is what they're looking for.
Right.
They didn't have the experience this year. You obviously, because you're losing Drew Pine and he's not going to stick around to compete for a job in the spring, you have 2 games of starting experience and a handful of plays from last year that Tyler Buckner has. Experience is what they're looking for. And again, you drop a guy with sizable experience onto this team next year with what they've got coming back right now, not to mention what else they're trying to add in the transfer portal. And now the schedule next year is not going to be cupcake, but again, I think I would start off at 10-2 and work from there.
Well, and I want to address the part about guaranteeing them a starting job. I'm sorry, but unless my quarterback room literally blows up, I'm not going to guarantee anybody a starting position at any position, let alone quarterback at the University of Notre Dame. And if you don't want to compete for a job, I don't want you on my team. I'm sorry. Maybe that makes me old school, but.
And again, that's why JT Daniels wasn't here last year to begin with, because that was it was conversation they had with him when he was in the portal, but he wanted to be guaranteed. And I think that the fact that Daniels is going to be on to his 4th school kind of shows where his mentality is. And that's not the kind of mentality that you want around. If you're not, if you don't want to take anyone who's not willing to come in and compete to earn their job.
Absolutely agree with that. As a coach, I want guys competing at everything. Who's going to be first in line at dinner? Who's going to have the best reps at practice? Whatever. I want you to compete. I don't want some guy walking in just being the starter. No, that is not how I want to run my team if I had one.
On the subject, we've got a super chat from Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. Drake made it ND. Hashtag Drake made it ND. I know it can't happen, but I can dream.
Right. You 100% can dream. There's nothing.
Did you see that Longo is leaving North Carolina to go to Wisconsin? Though?
Honestly, I think that might be one of the bigger shakeups in the coaching community that I've seen up to this point, if I'm being honest, because what is North Carolina? They are the offense, and they've been the offense because Longo is there, and now he's leaving to go to Wisconsin. And you want to talk about a scheme shift there? I'm very interested to see the direction that North Carolina goes at this point. And
I'm interested to see if Drake May does, make this official. Is that his destination? Is he following Longo to Wisconsin? Like that kind of thing.
I would be shocked if he left. He's kind of a, what is it called? A legacy at North Carolina. You know what I mean? His brother played basketball and the whole thing. But I would be shocked if he left. If he does leave, though, and I'm Notre Dame, I'm going hard.
Oh, for sure.
There's no doubt about it.
There's a lot of schools that are going to go hard after him.
No doubt about it.
The question about Stetson Bennett, why is he a Heisman finalist, not dumping on the guy? Just think he's average, surrounded by mostly monsters. Yeah, that's it. I mean, again, I don't
disagree with that.
Yeah.
But again, I think he's a distant 4th at this point, and I think there's a distant 2, 3, 4. Who else are you going to bring? I mean, at that point, who else is getting voted for? We know that this is pretty much a quarterback award at this point, and you figure you're going to be picking from the best teams in the country, right? You know what? His stats aren't terrible. His stats are pretty decent. He's not going to be flashy, but his stats aren't bad. And all he does is win. Okay.
I mean, Ian Book. Right. I mean, I mean,
He got Heisman
when you
votes.
describe that.
He got Heisman votes.
Yeah.
He did. He got
Yeah.
Heisman votes, which is ridiculous. Same situation, except the only difference is Stetson Bennett has a national championship. But if you remember, what was it? Ian Book had Heisman votes and he had 16 touchdowns. Like,
right.
It was, the numbers were terrible, but he was getting Heisman votes because
you're looking at a guy,
Notre
just what you said. He won a national championship last year. They haven't lost since the SEC championship game, I believe it was last year, and he's still the starting quarterback. So career achievement award is what it comes down to for him. Like Drake May probably should be there instead of him, but he's not.
And look,
for him, Michigan, that's
right. Everybody in the chat that's saying that they're, if they bring in Drake May, that there shouldn't even be a quarterback competition. He should be named the starter. I still want him to compete for the job. It doesn't have to be a long competition. It could be over in a week, but I still want a competition.
And that's just like Jack Cohn and Drew Pine last year. The competition lasted less than a week, but at least for the first week of training camp, you say this is a competition. And
I don't want a guy walking in and just being like, I'm the starter. Like, I'm sorry. I don't care.
You can't just hand anything to anybody. Even if it's just a formality, you're telling them they're competing for the job.
Right. And guess what?
You make them go out and prove it.
Yes. And I hate to break it to everybody, but the spring and the fall of this past year, it was a formality as to who is going to be the starting quarterback.
Right.
Okay. And that could be the case if you bring in somebody like Drake May. Maybe it's a formality. You still want him to compete, period. Sorry, I'm getting a little heated about this. I need to slow down.
It's okay. How excited are you to see Buckner and the young guys hit the field in the bowl game?
I think I'm more excited to see Buckner behind a good offensive line or a experience-laced offensive line. I think that's what I'm more excited about, if I'm being honest, because I think that our boy, I shouldn't say that, but I think Tyler Buckner was put in a bad position. In that particular situation, he was put behind a bad offensive line, a running back room that hadn't proved itself, and a bunch of inexperienced wide receivers. And they basically put it on his shoulder and said, go win games for us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what he learned sitting in the box with Tommy Rees over the past 10 weeks and what he looks like behind a good offensive line and a really good running game and wide receivers who've elevated their game. Yeah, let's go. It's going to be fun.
Me too. I really talented guy, and I realized we didn't get to see it in those first two games of the season, but offensive line is a heck of a lot better, and it's still a guy who missed out on 2 seasons of high school football, and, so there's still a learning curve for him in terms of being out there on the field. And so I'm at the very least excited, just what you said, to see him behind a much improved offensive line than the one that he got to play behind, a much improved running game, and he can add another layer to that running game as well. Now, you don't want to see Tyler Buckner have to go out there and run the ball 15 times, or 10 plus times or whatever, but he can be a running threat as well, and there's a lot that he can add to that offense. So that's what I'm mostly excited to see. Now, that being said, we still don't, Tobias Merriweather finally cleared concussion protocol, and he's been out there practicing the last few days, no contact and stuff like that, it sounds like, but at least able to do his thing. And, that's a guy that I hope with some more time to sit and prepare, that maybe we get to see more of him in the bowl game as well, and maybe get to see a little bit of the future matched up with Tyler Buckner.
We saw a glimpse of the future when they were running the 12 personnel, and they had Tobias Merriweather and Deion Colsey on the field at the same time. Like that, when Michael Mayer was there, that formation got me very excited. Okay. Having just a bunch of tall dudes out there, and I would love to see in 11 personnel, Colsey, Merriweather, and Thomas. Like, let's go. Like, I think you could there's a lot of catch radius there when you're talking about those 3 guys.
You're giving me the chills, just like saying 21 and running backs. But I mean, that's something to think about. How are they going to change they're probably going to have to tweak. This goes back to the tight end question early on. They will have to tweak to some extent, what their personnel packages are going to look like, because Michael Mayer virtually never came off the field all season. There were very few times when he came off the field.
Yeah, wasn't very often.
So for that reason, you kind of start with that tight end. I think that they're without him being in the bowl, there are going to be more reasons, to go, hey, maybe, we're more 21 or even the 31 like they did a few times and then back to 11 like you're talking about. But, so I think maybe I'm most excited to see that, like how creative Tommy Rees really does get. We're probably going to see, we're probably going to be something, like going to come with a completely different look like he did in the Fiesta Bowl last year. And then we're never going to see that offense.
I know.
Again.
Again. I know.
That's exactly right. So Shannon wants to know how the transfer portal lessens the importance of recruiting to a degree.
I think it depends on the school that you're talking about. You're talking about USC? Yeah, I think it lessens your recruiting. If you're talking about a place like Notre Dame, then no, I don't think it does, because Notre Dame still can't go out or won't go out, or however you want to phrase it, and get the underclassmen transfers. They're just not going to. So you need to have a firm foundation, and that comes from recruiting high school kids. And that is their strategy. And it's very obvious that that's their strategy. That's why they upped the recruiting class from 21-22 to 27-28, because they knew some guys were going to leave, or they were going to ask them to leave, however you want to put it. And they are going to build from the bottom up. So, no, I don't think it lessens the importance of recruiting at a place like Notre Dame, a place like Michigan, places like that it is very difficult to get in as an undergrad. I was just talking to a Michigan guy earlier this week, and he sounded like a Notre Dame guy. He's like, yeah, I mean, they're not, admissions at Michigan is not going to let in, underclassmen guys, because they're not just going to give away a Michigan degree. That's the same thing for Notre Dame, and they're both high academic institutions.
And I don't even know what the answer to this is right now, but when Brandon Joseph got here, he talked about the fact he didn't know where his degree was going to be coming from, Northwestern or Notre Dame. That was still one of the things that had to be resolved because he was an undergrad. But I also think that, like, when you're looking at the opportunity to get undergrad type guys, and I think Marcus Freeman might have been asked this kind of right after that point, is like the Northwesterns, the Dukes, Stanford, Vanderbilt, the other private schools, Wake Forest even, those kind of schools, it's probably going to be easier for you to get an undergrad from those places into Notre Dame, because you've got, in some cases, even higher academic requirements and standards, but, at the very least, similar academic standards and requirements to get them in. But, I don't think it changes what you're talking about, the degree. I think it's just, it's, are we here to win football games? And that's something that has to be reconciled above Marcus Freeman, but Marcus Freeman also has to have a hand, in that discussion, in trying to say, hey, look, we're this and this away from being a really good team. If we can get this guy and this guy, these fill some immediate needs for us. And I still think it's going to be more about that. It's much more about the needs that you can fill from the football team, but also, again, the willingness of the school to work with you a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. And I think there's going to be a little bit of leeway at Notre Dame, a little bit. I think it's going to get less stringent, but not by a whole lot. Right. I think so. They'll have the opportunity to bring in one, maybe two guys, a cycle, maybe that's an underclassman, but it's still going to be very, very difficult. And if you're a fan of Notre Dame and you're a fan of what Notre Dame stands for, then you should want it that way, in my opinion. Notre Dame is different. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you want it to be different. I'm okay with that, personally. I really am. And you can still go to the transfer portal and plug some holes with graduate transfers and be just fine, as long as you are recruiting at a high level. So all the fans out there that want Notre Dame to relax their standards and all that, then maybe you're not a fan of Notre Dame for the right reasons.
Report from 24/7 Sports that Notre Dame is expected to have up to 14 second period portal transfers.
What's the second period thing mean?
Yeah, I'm not really, it's not a term that I've heard, second period. Are you talking about second semester? Like bringing in 14 guys for the second semester? Or
so here's what I think. I think what this means is, and I think 247 is
leaving before the second.
I think they're saying leaving And I think that's absolutely possible. I think you're going to see a wave
we talked
of
about
guys.
this Monday.
We talked about this
Yeah, we talked about this Monday. That like the lower end of the depth chart, that there are potentially going to be a lot of those kind of guys.
Yeah, there's going to be a good amount of guys leaving after the bowl game. Like, I don't think you're going to see too many more before the bowl game, but after the bowl game, you're going to see a flood of guys leaving. You just will.
Derek, get to your counseling session or your grandma's 99th birthday party or something. You're late. You're late for something. Yeah. That's all I know.
There's going to be 2 waves. There's going to be 2 more waves of defections. It's going to be at the end of the bowl season, and then it's going to be the end of spring. So
Derek also said he heard Scott Bakula's character in Unnecessary Roughness was based on Bennett 4 or Bennett the Fourth.
That's great. It's a great movie, by the way. I'm a big fan of that movie.
I haven't seen that in a long time.
Good one. It was on one of those streaming services, and it came across. I was like, yes, and I watched it.
Bakula, Sinbad, Michael Irvin was in that. Kathy Ireland, the kicker, back in her heyday.
The one kid who was oh man, he's on like The Talk or The View or something these days. Why can I not think of his name?
It's not.
Was in
is
Stand
it Mario
by Me?
Lopez or
no? I know Mario Lopez. He was in Stand by Me, right? It was all those.
Oh, Jerry O'Connell.
Yes. Yeah, okay. He's in there.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that, by the way.
No problem. As soon as you said Stand By Me, I remembered that he was in there.
There we go.
One connected to the other. All right. Now we got our first really hard-hitting question of the night from Notre Dame 2164. How much longer do we ride with Marist before we cut our losses and go with the younger guys?
Well, I'll tell you what, and if I'm coaching this team, I'm making a hard, especially if Justin Adamilola doesn't come back, I'm giving a nice hard long look at Marist at Viper, because I think that might suit his skill set a little bit more. I'm not getting rid of him. I'm not going to cut my losses, right? You can have a rotation, number one. See if somebody beats him out. If somebody beats him out to make him more plays, then so be it. But I'm going to give him a nice hard long look at Viper.
I mean, he's better just pinning his ears back and going. So, right. I mean, that would make sense over there at Viper. And he's, like his size is good enough. I think that makes a lot of sense, to do something like that. There's going to be more competition at linebacker next year.
Yep. And I like all the young guys, to be honest with you. I like a lot of those young guys, and I think they're going to push for playing time.
A lot of people do. That's why people keep asking these questions about Bertrand and Leofau. So I've been thinking about this question. Random question. Whom would you consider the best quarterback to play at Notre Dame that never got to show his talent because of the offensive philosophy?
Ooh, because of the offensive philosophy.
Like, I go back to Carlisle Holiday as an example. He was the quarterback, remember, before Brady Quinn, and he was more an athlete. But when Tyrone Willingham and what's his name, Diedrich, came in and they were running that West Coast offense, it was square peg, round hole for Carlisle Holiday. And I mean, he ended up, I remember he got drafted by a Major League Baseball team. He ended up, I think, with the Arizona Cardinals for a year or two,
that.
Again, just as an athlete.
Yeah.
And so he's one who comes to mind, just completely wrong system for Carlisle Holiday, to try to thrive in a West Coast offense, timing and, all that different stuff. It just wasn't meant for Carlisle Holiday. I think in a different kind of offense, he could have been somebody different. That's the best one I could think of. Can you think of anyone, more?
I mean, I hate to say it because it's probably going to upset some people, but I will say like a Ron Paulus type of quarterback. I mean, he was literally playing in a triple option, and I don't know that really fit who he could have been. Okay. If we're just talking about offensive philosophy, I like yours though a lot. I think that's about it for me. If you talk about, quarterback,
like even Brandon Wimbush, like if that offense had been, again, now you've got to be able to hit some layups still, no matter what kind of system you're in. And that was his biggest issue is, just like short little passes out to the flat, just weren't there. But I mean, great athlete. And I thought that we
Right.
were going to see much more from Brandon Wimbush than what we ended up seeing from him at Notre Dame.
And it wasn't because of offensive philosophy, but it was because of injury. I still think Malik Zaire could have been really special at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do.
Very true too.
I think he got the raw end, not only of the injury, that's obviously nobody's fault. Okay. But the following competition, quarterback competition, he got absolutely screwed, in my opinion.
Hendricks is another guy, I kind of half thought of, but it's not like he went to a lower level, and it's not like he went on and did great things after he left. Here, so.
I wouldn't say it was because of the system. I mean, he never even really elevated himself as to even a starter, at Notre Dame. So I don't know.
Yeah. And Michael says Bill Dietrich may have been the worst assistant coach ever at Notre Dame. Yes, worse than even BVG, worse than Tenuta, worse than Dell. And you're just lucky you didn't have to try to talk to him, Michael. That was nothing was ever that guy's fault.
Yeah.
Nothing was ever that guy's fault. Let me see where we are right now. I think we've kind of run the course. Tommy asked about sports documentaries. There's one called Go Tigers from the early 2000s. I think 2000 exactly. Could be a buy of the year. Okay, I'll have to see if I can. Is it on Netflix or one of the streaming services? Have to see if we can find it someplace. Go Tigers. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Well, Vince, if we have no further questions, Brendan Clark is another one that I see talking about the quarterbacks.
Brendan Clark was just not accurate. So if you're not an accurate quarterback, you're going to struggle to be successful in any system.
Kevin said, did we see the long interview with Deshaun Kaiser? Talked about the Malik situation. I did not, and this is the first I had heard of that. Is this the one where he outed Aaron Rodgers for, like 9/11 and all that kind of stuff? Or
what?
You didn't hear about that?
No.
He did some interview. I think it was with a podcast or something. And he said the first time that he went over to Aaron Rodgers' house, he walked in and Rodgers was like, hey, first thing that he asked him was if he believed in 9/11. And Kaiser was like, there. Yeah. And he said, Rodgers said, you might want to do some research on that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
What?
Same podcast, Kevin says. I have not. I'll have to see if I can look that up. Interesting. All right, Vince.
Is it time?
Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go.
Let's do it, baby. Let's do it. So we got Michael Mayer stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
And Michael Mayer, he is done. He is gone. He has opted out for the NFL. So how will you remember Michael Mayer's career at Notre Dame?
I know this probably isn't all that creative, but I'll remember him as the best tight end in Notre Dame history at a place that produces really good tight ends. And that's not a sexy answer to that question, but the dude was just reliable, and he is a good teammate. He was a good leader. He was everything that you would want in an elite football player on your team. I will say that because I think he was a very, very, very good leader on that team. And I know Brian has told this story numerous times, but there's a freshman that was on the team this year. Michael Mayer just showed up at his dorm room and said, "You're working out with me today." It wasn't even somebody that was in his position group. You know what I mean? It was just like, "Hey, it's your day. Let's go." And they worked out together. People don't understand how uncommon that is, right? And it's even more uncommon when it's one of your best players on the team that is that good of a leader. So he is just a great mix of leadership and ability and talent and all of that. And he's obviously going to be missed. And I remember after his freshman year thinking to myself, better enjoy these next 2 years because there's no chance he's coming back for a fourth year. And here we are. And I will say that I did sit back and I enjoyed all 3 years of Michael Mayer. And I'm going to really enjoy watching him at the next level.
I mean, he's been fun to watch from day one. And I still remember, it's like his 3 years have just gone by in a flash. And like a couple of years ago, it was after his freshman season. I asked him if he surprised himself with what he was able to do. And he said, no, with a complete straight face.
Nope.
He said, I did what I expected to do. Now I've got more work to do and I'm going to get better. And 2 years later, he's the best tight end to wear a Notre Dame uniform. And I think you said that's saying something considering the tight ends who have come through this university, whether it's Tyler Eifert to go back to Bavaro or Cross and, all these different guys. You've had some tight ends come through Notre Dame, and he is the standard bearer. Catches, touchdowns, and yardage. I mean, and, for whatever reason, maybe he was so focused on being a receiver this year, but I don't know if you saw the little highlight, and I realize you can make anyone look good in a series of highlights, but still, he was a very consistent blocker last year, and that was something that he kind of had to work on again this year.
Agreed.
But one of the first memories, highlights that come to mind for me of Michael Mayer when I think about him is the awesome run that Kyron Williams had against North Carolina last year. That was an awesome run in itself. Who was the guy, the lead blocker on the sideline saying, "Let's go, big guy. We're getting down the sideline. You're getting to the end zone." It was Michael Mayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just everything that you talked about, the work effort or the work ethic that Michael Mayer has. He was the guy who was staying after practice, working with Drew Pine. Again, now maybe you didn't need so much one-on-one, work with Drew Pine. Maybe you need to be bringing some wide receivers in as well. But obviously, it starts with him, and that old coach's saying, when your best players are your hardest workers, you can go a long way.
Absolutely.
And he is right at the top.
There is zero chance of this, Jason, and it's not against you personally, but he says, I think Tommy Rees and Coach Marcus Freeman asked Michael Mayer to move on to make room for the younger guys.
No.
I hope that's a joke. Maybe it is, because he just put out smiley
you're
happy faces.
You're not going to tell Michael Mayer to take a walk for one game. It's no.
Not a chance. Not a chance. And if Michael Mayer, now he could have said, now if I'm Marcus Freeman and Michael Mayer said, "Hey coach, I think I'm about coming back next year," I'm like, dude, you're going to be a first round draft pick. You need to go. I would say that, but I'm not saying it because I need to get younger guys playing time.
Right.
Because you're pushing the best player on your team out the door. And that's not why you do it. You do it because it's the best thing for him. Right. But it would be hard for me to tell him not to come back if he said, "Coach, I'm coming back for my 4th year."
Yeah.
That would be really hard.
Fill in the blank, Vince. Notre Dame's biggest surprise player this season was blank.
This may ruffle some feathers, and frankly, I hope it does. I'm going with Drew Pine. I think that he was a big surprise. I think he was a big surprise in many different ways. Number one, that he started 10 games for the University of Notre Dame, which if you told me that when he walked in the door, I would have said no chance. I think that at times he played way ahead of his skis and did a great job. And so I'm going to give this to Drew Pine. And there's other guys, obviously, that we could choose, but he was a good surprise for me. So, okay, Jason was joking. I appreciate that, Jason. Thank you. It's hard to tell when I'm reading it on the text, okay? So yeah. I apologize. You the man. I appreciate that, Jason. But no, that's the first one that came to my mind, so I'm sticking with it. He was the biggest surprise for me.
It's funny because I thought you would go with Benjamin Morrison. Pine was going to be my answer as well. I think it's absolutely right because, again, we saw Drew Pine in fall camp, and the Drew Pine that we saw in fall camp was not, the Drew Pine that we saw in the first half of Cal and that we saw in the mop-up, not mop-up, but at the end of the Marshall game when Notre Dame was trying to come back. It's like, that's like nightmare worst case, but, I didn't think it would be quite that bad, but it's like that was your biggest concern when you saw Drew Pine. Then he finally calmed down, whether getting yelled at and, do your effing job was the key to the whole thing or not. He settled down and he rode that streak for a couple of games and he was really good. But, there was still a lot of room for improvement. But this guy, ultimately backup quarterback, 3-star guy, led Notre Dame to an 8-2 record. And to me, it's really surprising that he was able to do that. I wouldn't have thought that they would be able to get through the season with that kind of record with Drew Pine. Now, Benjamin Morrison, again, like when he showed up on campus during summer workouts, you started to hear a little bit of things, but it's still one thing to be a workout warrior in the summer as a true freshman, and it's another thing to step on the field and actually do it on Saturdays.
Sure.
And just like any cornerback, especially a young one, he had his ups and downs. Did he give up some scores? Sure he did. But, Trevon Diggs, my guy with the Dallas Cowboys, led the NFL in interceptions last year. He gave up some touchdowns, but what does Benjamin Morris have that the great cornerbacks have? He has a short memory. He puts it behind him and he keeps going. So I think you can make a case for him as a surprise as well. Again, the talent there, but just the fact, and especially like we were hearing more about 21. I'm drawing a blank now on his name. Mickey, thank you. Jaden Mickey.
Yep.
Like especially after the spring that like Mickey was going to be the guy. And then here comes Benjamin Morrison after not even having a spring and, to do what he did at the end of the season with all the interceptions. So just great, to see a freshman like that. So I think you can make a case for either of them, but I agree. I'd put Pine at the top of my list as well. All right. I got a star. Did you star that? Yeah, you did. Super chat before it gets away. Once the college football playoff rankings start coming out during the season, Vince, we get the weekly TV show to make the reveal that comes with it. Do you buy or sell that the college football playoff weekly reveal show needs to go away?
It needs to go away. I have no problem with them having a show for the first one and the last one, but all the ones in between, you can just do it on SportsCenter. You have a segment or whatever when you do the reveal, that's fine. But the entire show, number one, they don't have it at the same time every week. That's super annoying.
Especially once basketball starts.
Yes, because they try to do it in between games, or they try to do it at halftime of one of the games, and if a game goes into overtime, no, if you're going to have one, then you need to have it at the same time every Tuesday, like clockwork, and they're never going to do that. So my solution is you do it on SportsCenter. You have a segment. I have no problem if the talking heads want to throw around their opinions for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? But you don't need a half an hour to an hour-long show to reveal a top 25 that's not that different. First show, first reveal, last reveal, not in between.
Well, and you're putting, this year, obviously, the chairman was Boo Corrigan from North Carolina State. Chairman's different all the time. But you put that guy in a situation where from week to week, he basically, if you went and looked every week and you transcribed everything that was saying, he's contradicting himself from week to week, and you're putting him in the position where he has to contradict himself and the committee and the way they have to explain different things. I don't think you need an explanation from the top every day. I completely agree with what you're saying. You do it the first time. Here we are, late October, first rankings come out and explain it, and then do it the last time, just this past week, like we had, do it on, the Sunday when the announcements are made. You explain what things came down to. I don't think you should have to explain week to week. And just like you said, because of the varying times and everything else, what are you really serving? Who are you really serving by doing that? The rest of the rank, like for the rest of eternity, these rankings have come out and, no one's had to explain the AP and the coaches poll on a week to week basis.
And it comes out like clockwork on Sundays. I mean, that's what needs to happen. I'm sorry. And to be honest with you, waiting until Tuesday is a little ridiculous as well. But
yeah, and then there's that. But it's probably because of Monday Night Football. It's basically a TV program.
TV
is what
thing.
it is.
You're right. Because
it's good enough ratings that they'll probably never do away with it. But in terms of its actual usefulness, I don't think you need it at all.
Right.
You guys have ESPN, yes, because I still pay for cable. So
rich kids.
Yes. And I also, watch games all the time.
Right. See, that's the other thing. A lot of games are on the ESPN family of networks. And so if you are in a profession like Sean and myself, or if you are just a sports fan, you don't have to agree with the stuff that they say, but they do have a lot of games. So you got to kind of pay attention.
Right. Fill in the blank. As people who cover Notre Dame, we hear time and again about the importance of being in a conference and the conference championship games. But guess what? This year, a team lost in the conference championship game, and another team didn't even play in a conference championship game. and they're both in the Final Four. And that means blank, Vince.
It means that the top 12 that is going to come out in a couple of years would look a heck of a lot different than it does right now, because the caveat of having to be a conference champion and be in the top 4, you're going to get some people elevated to being in the top 4 that have no business being in the top 4.
See, and that's like the conferences want those championship games to still mean something. And that's exactly right. Like Kansas State would not be in the top 4, but neither would TCU because they didn't win the conference championship game. That's a great point.
That would be because if you have to
They'd
be a
both
conference
be in the
champion,
playoff, but neither one of them would be in the top 4.
Well, but if you have to be a conference champion, you only have 5 choices about who could be in the top 4, right?
Right.
So I think
you have 5 plus the group of 5, because I think the group of 5 can still qualify as a conference champion if they're ranked high enough.
Okay. So
yeah,
it would be very interesting to see who the top 4 would be, though, right? Because you got Kansas State 1, Utah 1.
Let me pull up the rankings here real quick, and I'll help you out.
Are those 2 in the top 4?
Hang on.
You know what I mean?
Hang on a second.
All right. What do you got?
Like I said, I'll pull up the rankings here. So Georgia and Michigan, that's your 1 and 2.
Obviously.
And then after that, you would go down to Utah as the 8th ranked team.
They're now
because they won a conference championship. And Kansas State actually would be. Clemson. I'm sorry.
Oh, Clemson. Yeah.
Because Clemson beat North Carolina. So you would have Clemson at number 3 and then Utah at number 4 for seeding purposes, because it is the top 4 conference champions who get those top 4 seeds.
And then you fill out the rest. But I mean, it changes the whole dynamic of the playoff because of that. You have to be a conference champion thing to be in the top 4. Completely changes it. Clemson gets their way in just like that. Just like that, they're in, even though they had one really bad loss and then a loss to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I guess, and you bring up good point, because after next year it's going to 12 teams. So they're going to mean something completely
but they don't
different.
mean squat right now.
Right now it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And I was kind of gearing it more toward like the whole, Notre Dame, you've got to be in a conference and all this. Now obviously there will be an argument at that point about, once it goes on for a few years, if Notre Dame is making the playoff regularly, but not able to get, that first round bye, that might be something that makes them weigh what they want to do for the future. But you bring up an excellent point, because the conference commissioners or, the schools, the conferences that they belong to, these are still money makers, these conference championship games, and they want there to be some importance on those games going forward. So the conference championship games are actually going to mean a heck of a lot more in 2 years once the 12-team format begins than what they mean right now. Because right now they mean absolutely nothing.
Right.
That's, again, my point was you got 2 teams in there that didn't win, conference championships, but you're absolutely right. In a couple of years, they're going to mean a lot. Going to mean a heck of a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Baseball, Vince. Hot stove. Cubs.
I didn't know this until I read your rapid fire this afternoon, and it hurts me. Go ahead.
Okay, so you confused me for a minute, but so the Cubs signed Cody Bellinger, and they also got a starting pitcher, Jamison Talent, yesterday. The Mets got Justin Verlander. Wilson Contreras
there it is.
Signed away from the Cubs. That's what kills you, isn't it? He's going to be a Cardinal, and the Yankees paid big to keep Aaron Judge in pinstripes. So who's had the best hot stove week among those teams? I can tell you, I mean, how does let's start with this, Mr. Cubs fan, since you're bemoaning it already. Does getting Bellinger and Talon, does it offset losing Wilson Contreras to the Cardinals?
No, it doesn't. Because, and look, and when I saw, and I texted you when I saw it, I was like, hey, the Cubs got Cody Bellinger. And then it made it so obvious that I don't watch Dodger games, because I had no idea that Cody Bellinger has stunk the last couple of years. Because I started looking at his numbers, and I started reading about him and understanding why the Dodgers let him go. Of course, the Cubs are going to pick him up because that's just how that works.
That's what they do. For $17.4 million, and it's only a one-year deal.
One-year deal,
which I don't really understand.
Well, I think the way I read some of the things that he was looking for a one-year deal because he wants kind of a reclamation project, like he wants
to prove himself because of the fact that he has been down. I guess that makes sense.
And then he wants to go out and be a free agent again. Okay,
yeah,
I get that. That's fine. And so I'm okay with the Cubs taking a flyer on Cody Bellinger because we've seen what he can do. Let's hope he can, find that flame again, I guess. But no, the Wilson Contreras news just shot me right in the heart. Number one, that he left. And then number two, that he goes to the Cardinals of all places. The Cardinals, like that hurts. I'm going to have to watch now for the next 5 years him hurt the Cubs in more ways than one. Like the Cardinals just got rid of a catcher that I hated. Great player, but he played for the Cardinals. Okay. So I hated him. And now I have to hate Wilson Contreras? Like, come on, man. That's mean. But I will say that it's amazing that Justin Verlander is still the pitcher that he is at how old he is, to be honest with you. I think that's a good pickup for the Mets. But if I'm being honest, I think the Yankees are doing the best of the ones that you gave me because I think Aaron Judge is pretty darn good.
Didn't win a World Series with him. Didn't even get to the World Series with him. Fair. He's great. He's had one great year. I was actually looking forward to being able to cheer for Aaron Judge if he was going to go to San Francisco, but now he's going to stay in New York. I don't blame him for taking the paycheck and all that, but I just – when I look, I think the Cubs made out pretty well. No, you're absolutely right. Bellinger has some work to do, and that whole thing, he's got to prove himself. But I think it's interesting, like as watching them trade away all the stars a couple of years ago, either trade away or watch them walk. That they're reinvesting now, and they're willing to sink some money in it and see what they can do. Even though they weren't able to keep Wilson Contreras around, but. Got a lot of young guys coming up, too.
I would have loved for them to re-sign Rizzo, and he re-signed with the Yankees, which stinks. And now Wilson Contreras is gone. So pretty much any tie to the World Series team is officially gone at this point, except for David Ross, and he was a player. Now he's the coach. So, it's time to rebuild. Not that it wasn't time for that before, but,
Couple of different things. Adam Brenneman show for the Deshaun Kaiser interview.
I'm going to look that up.
If I can find that.
That sounds interesting.
Yep. And then we have another super chat. A lot of Oklahoma fans seem pretty confident Peyton Bowen will flip. How likely do you think it is that he will stay?
It was the same confidence level that Oklahoma fans had that Lincoln Riley was going to be their head coach before he got on a plane and went to USC. So I feel pretty good about the fact that Notre Dame will retain Peyton Bowen. I listen to Ryan and Brian on a regular basis, and they're not worried, so I'm not worried. So
that's where I tend to go as well. I've got to listen to our recruiting guys, the guys who are in there, with the contacts and the details and all that kind of stuff. So, speaking of one last recruiting question, is the 23 class a true gap closer?
I mean, to be honest with you, if they're the second ranked class in the country, I think that qualifies. I mean, in talent and in size, they are. Absolutely. And you're right, everybody. I forgot about Kyle Hendricks. My bad. Sorry. You're absolutely right. But he's kind of a shell of his former self at this point. So we'll see how that goes. But no, I think that this is a very, very, very good class, and they're still adding pieces to it. So, yes, this is a gap closing class. No question about it.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I think it's not just this class. It's you have to stack these classes together. You can't just go out and have, we've got the number 2 rated class now. You've got to stack classes on top of each other. And,
absolutely.
And that's, by having Minchie already next year, that's a great early first step. And obviously CJ Carr the year after that, they've already started with good building blocks. And that's what it's going to come to. It can't just be one class. You've got to, continue to do it, but everything we've seen from Marcus Freeman and this group says they're on that path. And that's
absolutely
what we've said all along was if they're truly going to be competitors for national championships, that's what it's going to be. And this is a great first step. Great first step.
No, absolutely. And I'm looking it up. Recruiting rankings. I need to see where Notre Dame landed in the 22s, but I want to say they were a top 10. And of course, my internet they were 7. So they were 7 last year. And I believe they're sitting at number 2 this year. So number 3, according to 247, but I've seen number 2 with some other with some other services, right? So at least a top 3 class, we'll call it that. And the 24 class is already shaping up to be pretty stinking good as well. They're the number 2 class right now in the 24 class. And I realize it's very early, but they're stacking those classes, like you said. And that's the important part when it comes to recruiting. So I'm very excited about where this staff is going from a recruiting standpoint.
Absolutely. All right. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. Hit that like button again, if you would, before you leave this evening. We do appreciate it. It does help out Irish Breakdown greatly. Jesse and I will be in tomorrow, and we will have much more for you. And we'll have that special rapid fire on Friday as well.
Yes, sir.
4:30. Should we plan on 4:30 on Fridays?
I think 4:30
Fridays
is safe.
for the rapid fire.
I think 4:30 is safe. Yeah.
We'll see if we get any news to break this week like we had last week.
You never know. Probably not like the news we had last week, I wouldn't think, but at least I hope not.
I was going to say, let's hope not anyway. All right. Thanks again. Great mailbag. A lot of great questions out there tonight. And we will talk to you tomorrow. IB Nation Sports Talk.